Zoom, zoom, zoom. Welcome to the Squeaky Wheel, folks. With me, as always, is my very good friend, Lawrence, the President Gervais. Folks, I'm Ross Memphis Pambrin. Always excited to bring you a new conversation from a Métis perspective. Folks, it's National Wildlife Week, or just coming to the tail end of it. So if you're out there and you see cougars anywhere and you see any bears or any wildlife, just walk up to them and just give them a little pet behind the ear and say thank you for doing your part for the ecology. And it's also National Straw Hat Month. So any opportunity, and you know, Lawrence, today I would have been wearing my straw cowboy hat, but I decided to go with essentially the Blue Jays won yesterday. I'm wearing my Rush baseball shirt, folks, just to show that this is something that I picked up when I was out on tour with the band in order to celebrate the return of baseball. And though all of us are always a little bit angry with how the million upon $1 million baseball players deal with the start of every season, did you watch that game last night, Lawrence? Because it was a barn burner.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot of offense in it. Our pitching was terrible, certainly that first inning, but definitely, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We have a very strong offensive team, but not so much on the defense side, and that's when we kind of lack a little bit. And that's something that we should look at. But whatever, I think it was a high-scoring game. Can't go wrong.
Your energy as a baseball analyst, Lawrence, needs to, I guess it's the early part of the season, so maybe we can't expect you to take off just yet. But folks, the Blue Jays were behind 7-0. I think it was going into the fourth inning. Yeah. And then they started to rally a little bit, hit a few runs here, back and there. Just great baseball as far as I was concerned, because we actually got to see the energy of a team come back. Some great catches. You're right. I think they went through 8 pitchers to try and win that game. But if you could start off your season like that against Texas, I figure, you know what, we're doing all right.
This episode brought to you by the Métis Nation of Alberta, with a vision of a strong Métis Nation embracing Métis rights, and a mission to pursue the advancement of the socioeconomic and cultural well-being of the Métis people of Alberta. For more information, go to www.albertamétis.com. Now, back to the show.
And folks, for those of you who are just listening out there, I've got my Blue Jays game sweater here behind me. I've got my red Blue Jays Canadian baseball cap on. I'm wearing my Rush jersey, my baseball jersey. Lawrence, as always, is adorned in a expensive power suit and glasses that look like they're framed out of some of the most expensive equipment or materials on earth. And the guitars are always hanging somewhere near us. So thank you again always for joining us. Our first conscious awareness that I really want to bring attention to is our thoughts are always with the people of Ukraine. There's thoughts all around the world. In fact, even Pink Floyd recently, Lawrence, has done a song, or I think it might have been a sort of an event celebration that they're recording with an injured Ukrainian musician. So he was injured, during some of the war activity that's occurring on the other side of the world. And like all groups that are doing such a strong awareness, here's another, multi-international superstar band who's saying this isn't right.
Yeah, I mean, the more and more people come forward and kind of see or how they protest, the war, is certainly coming to light. We're seeing a lot more celebrities, bands starting to come forward, but either end, we wish Zelensky a lot support, but nobody as a country is coming forward yet to really support them. So,
yeah, you're right. I mean, NATO's trying to sort of take their steps here and there, but of course, there's always this fear of a much larger war occurring. Apparently, I was unaware, but somebody had mentioned to me that a number of the baseball for their opening days had Ukrainian flags all the way around their building, or were actually doing the Ukrainian anthem in order to start. So that awareness can't end. Just like our awareness when it comes to our conversation regarding residential schools cannot come to an end. We need to continue to bring this up within our homes, within our communities, make sure that our families are aware of the impacts. I was recently doing a national conversation regarding environmental monitoring, and I'd asked George to come and could he do a prayer, and he was telling a story of that the families that he knew from in the Meadow Lake community, there was a residential school not necessarily very far away, and some of the children within that residential school could actually see their homes from there, but they weren't allowed to go home because the best nature of this education was that they stay within the school. And then just because of living in northern Saskatchewan, it's always a challenge when it comes to the cold weather. So if you were too far away from, where your family was, they may have a difficult time coming to even visit you during those short periods of time that allowance occurred. So we can't forget, the challenge to those communities, because we're still only creating new awareness. We're still only learning about it, and we continue to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was tough for all these families. I mean, we have so many stories of people that would, go out, work the field, and come back and their kids were gone, and, those type of things, and never to be seen again. And that's certainly something that is a reminder, I think, of the truth that went on there. But, moving forward, we're trying to get those records, trying to understand who the students were, where they were, those type of things, and certainly working with the church now to actually get those things in place is important.
Well, and so the three different groups that had gone over, the Inuit, the First Nations, and the Métis groups that were going over to speak to the Pope, I think they're all back now. And, from there, it sounds like our next step is continue to share that awareness of what happened and the apology and how that apology was received and perceived. And it sounds like that the sort of papal group is going to come over here. How do we come up with the idea? I mean, he doesn't have time to visit every residential school. Where's the important spot that we need, him to recognize? I can't speak on behalf of the Inuit. I know that they are working to try and come up with an awareness of what would be important to them as a message to share and to show. And I can't speak for the First Nations, but Lawrence, what do you think when it comes to our Métis community? Like we have lots of new, buildings and areas that we're celebrating, but which are the ones that have the history?
Well, I think for us and what we share here in Alberta is Lac St. Anne. So that's near St. Albert. And that was a place, people can look it up, but it was a place where you can go and get healed by dipping yourself into the lake. First Nations and Métis have been going there for thousands of years in ceremony. Well, not us for thousands of years, but
no, but I understand.
First Nations have been going there for quite a while. But we've gone there. There is a church there. There is a strong Catholic faith. My mom even remembers going there as a child, and a lot of our elders remember going there. So, that's sort of a vital place, I think, that they might consider attending. But I really don't know what the plan is. And, he's of an age that it's pretty hard for him to move around, too.
So you're suggesting that we either move him by Red River cart or try and get him some kind of a papal, like a quad that he could ride on.
Yeah, quad.
Because if you're trying to scoot around, making your way all around Lac St. Anne, I could see how, they always come up with one of those Pope mobiles. I remember growing up seeing these different cars, and here would be the Pope inside, and he'd be elevated so that everybody could see him as he drove around. Maybe we need, folks, just throwing this out here, if you're listening and you have any design ideas regarding a Pope Red River cart and how we can come up with and create something that we could tow the Pope around. And now, of course, you're saying, Lawrence, it would have to be quite padded in order to, it'd be easier on his back as he's rolling down. And we probably have to come up with a new system so that it's not so loud, because once those wheels start squeaking on that Red River cart, we won't be able to hear anything that's going on.
No, especially a sermon. No, but definitely. If it's a vehicle that can get him through the bush, I mean, it's a bit of a walk to get in there. So I'm sure they'll have a way to do it.
Well, and I was looking up last time we'd had a conversation about Lac St. Anne. Beautiful. What a beautiful area, beautiful place to visit. I absolutely agree. I think that's one more thing that we need to look into and to share that message of what was the long history of the awareness of healing. Because if the Pope is going to go someplace, there's going to be a strong contingent of people who want to go celebrate him being there, and sort of reevaluate and hopefully reconnect with faith, so they have that personal understanding, they have that personal awareness, they have that personal connection, and hopefully allow that apology to start to allow them to heal, because that seems to be one of the strongest things, was hearing those words so that people can start to give up some of the anger and start to try and find some of the faith.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the things I wanted to talk about, Lawrence, and this is in consideration, recently, I think within the last week or so, there's a gentleman, veteran Paul Delorme, has died at 101. Now, I think he's coming, I think he was in Manitoba. I'll have to look it up again. But so, celebrated Métis veteran of the Second World War. He was taken prisoner in 1942 after a failed raid on Dieppe, which was a considerable loss for Canadian soldiers. This gentleman had recently, in 2019, we've talked about it before, how Indigenous veterans, after they left service at whatever time, the government sort of said, well, hey, thanks for serving, but you're not going to receive the same benefits that anybody else received who's left the military. Because if you're Indigenous, you're going to go back to what the provisions are for you in Indigenous community. So in 2019, after this discrimination sort of assessment had been going on, that anybody who had served in that capacity, or Métis, they were receiving up to $20,000 for their families. Now, I think there was only 9 individuals who ended up receiving that $20,000, and it was that recognition of all of the losses that occurred. But to say thank you for this man and his service as a Métis soldier, he was wounded by a grenade in battle, was taken prisoner of war with roughly 1,900 other Canadians, and twice this gentleman tried to escape. On his first attempt, he spent several days walking the countryside by night in his prisoner overalls, trying to get to the French border, but he was caught, spending almost 3 years in all as a prisoner of war, before finally coming home after the Allied victory. So, a tremendous loss to the Métis community, a tremendous thank you we have to give to his family and for his time and service. And, these are sometimes part of the reason why I enjoy our conversation, Lawrence, is because if we don't bring this up, if we don't create that awareness, how do our youth see some of the sacrifices that people have made? If it was up to me, Lawrence, parents would force their children to have to listen to our podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he spent 3 years as POW or something like that too. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
But no, and the recognition deserves, we know that whole recognition piece is part of the statement of claim at the MNC level about how the money was spent and for the veterans. But, we certainly hopefully get that door reopened where we can actually honor them and recognize them and give them support. And I know that's coming.
And I know that they're doing more. Like we've talked about the memorial that was put up at Métis Crossing, and that recognition. There's more conversation that's coming. But again, here was a long history of the soldiers who had served, the Indigenous soldiers who had served, and all of a sudden, once again, as soon as you leave service, the federal government just says, "Well, thank you. Go back to being somebody else's problem, or go back to being a different branch of the federal responsibility," right, instead of saying thank you for serving, thank you for that connection. So big shout out to the Delorme family and their a tremendous loss for their family. But there's a business mixer coming up, Lawrence, April 21st. Thoughts?
Well, another one at the Lougheed House. This one will be a little bit bigger. Now they've opened the door for 65 people rather than 50. But definitely should be fun. I think the Denby sisters will be there to play the fiddle, and a lot of mingling and a few speeches. But yeah, that's about it.
I always enjoy the Denby family for their connection with the Métis fiddle and the music. Father's a great guitar player. I think mom's a great guitar player too. And the two Denby girls who can just carry that energy and that music. And not only that, they also dress for the occasion. Mm-hmm. When they have those celebration ribbon dresses on, or the just the character, it just ties the music in beautifully. So, I'm excited. I always enjoy the mixers. There's always, like you said, for a lot of you who are unaware, the mixers have been going on for years. Of course, they struggled with the time as a result of the pandemic, and we tried a few virtual ones, and it's hard to connect that way because you don't have the easy allowance of breakout rooms and all that kind of stuff when you're on social media or when you're on sort of virtual. But the idea that we were still getting together, well, now I'm excited, right? Because we're connecting these business mixers with such a beautiful place like the Lougheed House, such a historic building, such a great heritage home for the province of Alberta and specifically down here in Calgary. And when people are coming out and you get a chance to chat with other business people within your community or share your awareness of business and how the impact of inclusivity and the Indigenous connection, Lawrence, it is a lot of fun. So I am looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should be hopefully a good turnout.
Yeah. So here's something fun I thought, Lawrence, that I was just reading about. Now, I'm sure you're familiar because actually, if I look closely somewhere in your room, there's probably boudoir photos of you. But there's a new, there's none behind, no. The camera doesn't capture everything, so maybe there aren't any out there of you. But the new thing I just was reading in CBC News was bouchoir. So there's a group, and I think a lot of it comes from, her name is Kim Tallbear, and I think she has some books, but she's also doing a program called TP Confessions. And what her sort of role or what she's trying to establish is that decolonizing sort of the sexuality of the Indigenous peoples. Now, I think they're doing a calendar, and how many times, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Calendar Girls, when it was the very much elderly senior ladies who were doing this sort of calendar with a bit of eroticism behind it. Well, now, in this case, they're trying to share the conversation about, the history of the land and the recognition of the land and sort of trying to take back the land. But they're doing bushwar. So they're doing actually in the forest. And in the families that are reconnecting with the community, they're creating art, they're creating jewelry, they're creating designs in order to destigmatize sexuality within First Nations or within any sort of community.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like if it's creating that awareness and it's not something that's too risque, definitely something we would like to promote here. But yeah, it sounds interesting. I've never seen it, so only your eyes.
And it was something, when I first saw it, I'm like, woo, do I have to, because unless Devin or Leighton behind the scene hits the beep to cover any of the words, I have to be a little bit cautious of trying to not offend anybody in our conversations. But there's, this conversation, if you look up bouchoir under CBC, there's Indigenous erotica in literature. There's these calendars that they're working on, trying to come up with the opportunity to have in-person gathering events, again, so that the allowance to have the conversation about sexuality and the history of Indigenous relationships and how they worked, these conversations are being shared. So one of the pictures I was looking at, I think, which is one of the authors, is kind of fun. She's in the bush, she's covering herself in essentially a moose hide, and part of her original sort of reintegration into the community or that awareness was she was taking a moose hide tanning course. So it wasn't just an initial investment into trying to jump into anything that was just specifically sexual. It was more, how are you reconnecting? And there's so many programs that we're looking at. I think it's great that somebody's found something that is a very much a different conversation piece and celebrating it and making it kind of fun. So yeah, they are trying to make it a bit G-rated, but then there will be new allowances for how involved you want to get into the conversation. But I think it's fun. It's the opportunity to recognize and identify that it's beautiful for all of us to love each other and to love ourselves. So yeah, really fun. Folks, make sure you look that one up. I think it's quite neat. So Kim Tallbear, and this was just coming out here recently. So there'll be a lot more, I'm sure that you can find when it comes to the information and where they get involved. But kind of a neat thing. Some of the other stuff that I was reading about recently, Lawrence, was in Inuvik. Again, we've talked before, like in the Métis community, we have our northern settlements, right? And can you give our audience just a little more of an explanation of how those settlements came about? Because I'm going to jump afterwards into talking about Inuvik and some of the challenges they face. And can you talk a little bit about the settlements?
Well, I'm not an expert in the settlements because I've never lived there myself, or I don't think I even have a relative that's ever been there. But, when the Métis Nation of Alberta was formed in the 30s, the early 30s, they had made agreements for a land grant. And I think originally there was 12 Métis settlements. I think we had some here in the south even. But now there's 8. They're just all in the northern sort of part of Alberta. And, it's still Crown land. You have to make an application to reside there. And there's certain things that you got to do as a Métis person in order to occupy that place. So that's, and then the settlements now have their own, I would say, agreement with Alberta. So they have their own president, their own governing council, and they're kind of held a little bit separate from the MNA, even though we represent those members who live there, but they do have their own governing members.
Would these have been sort of considered reserves at the time? Like, we're going to provide this Crown land for you, and here are sort of the rules, or here's the allowance that it is to live on there?
Not necessarily reserves. Like, I wouldn't call them that. Reserves have a certain connotation to the Indian Act and Indian agent and all that stuff, and that was never the agreement they had with Alberta. That was the federal government that implemented reserve system, right? So it's definitely different.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess settlement does end up being a better term for it, but recognizing that it's still Crown land and there still has to be a relationship. Well, one of the challenges with this community in Inuvik is, we've talked about how a lot of different First Nations, a lot of different areas, they struggle to get clean water. Well, now in this little community, I think they've gone a week or so without any water for their school. So seemingly, here they're provided with a school. They're the only one in that community. The water storage tanks and the filtration broke down. They have inadequate pumps. And to try and get a water tanker truck to bring fresh water to that school limits the opportunity for kids to even go there, because if there's no water, they can't go to the school. And the water trucks are struggling to keep up within that community to just provide water everywhere. Again, and it seems like just a constant conversation of how are we at a point where we have such great freshwater reserves, but within our nation, but how do we struggle with getting clean water to people? Is it that everybody else's focus is worried about trying to get Netflix? How are we behind when it comes to these basic supplies? Well, I don't expect you to necessarily have an answer. It's just
I don't think I have an answer for it. It's because it's way more complicated than that. And people like Ryan Reynolds, who recent celebrities taking it as his cause. I do believe it was in Trudeau's promises to actually bring clean water to the reserves, and it has to happen. That's when he was fumbling with his water bottle thing and talking about water dispenser. They couldn't get the word for it, but at the end of the day, they need clean water, and what they probably need to do is train as many people as they can who live on the reserve to actually monitor and do the work for it, because those systems are very highly like they'll break down, and then what happens? You lose water for the whole community again. So you really need trained people to go there and actually fix things and maintenance. That's the word for it. But that's certainly that has to happen, as well as all the funding needs to go to support that too. So,
and in this day and age, fresh water really shouldn't have to be a fight. It shouldn't have to be a political battle. But shamefully, at least the recognition at the level of the media is garnering attention, and we're having that conversation. So, having the lights on, Leighton, you can see it brightly shining. Send the signal out, Lawrence. Let's talk about Indigenous plants. As always is in our podcast, we're now having this conversation about new plants. Lawrence, what do you got for us today?
Well, I think we probably want to talk about rat root. You know, it's very common amongst First Nations and Métis, I think Inuit too, to um, really use this to relieve a lot of cold symptoms. People who have asthma can use it. It is about half an inch in diameter. It's light brown in color. It grows under the water. They call it rat root because the muskrats kind of feed on it, and it's in boggy sort of places. And by chewing a small piece of the root, when one suffers with a sore throat, it helps you quite a bit. And if you grate it, it's great for asthma sufferers. You place a small amount of grated root on the back of the tongue, and then you swallow the saliva that gathers in your mouth. And what this root does, it actually creates a lot of saliva in it. So when you have a really dry, sore throat, it relieves all those symptoms too, right?
So all you're suggesting is that you want me to just start chewing and keeping rat root in my mouth.
That's
Like,
right.
could we not have come up with a better? Is it too late to change the name of it to healthy, softening, easy mouth? Like, for goodness sakes, rat root. We'll have to get.
Yeah.
Look, you got a picture of it? We're gonna have to get the fellas throw a picture up.
Yeah, I'll throw a picture of it, but I mean, it's just a crude drawing, but you can find it. It's called wild ginger. I mean, you can call it that too if you want. It looks like ginger actually,
Oh, okay. It looks
but
like
just a
ginger. Yeah.
smaller form of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll fire a picture of that up there. And where is it found? And have you ever eaten it? Have you ever chewed
Oh
it?
yeah.
Because I know
I got some
yeah.
at home too. I got some here at home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just common, I think, for people to have, but
I wonder if it's sort of like a wild ginger. Here, folks, I'm just throwing this idea out there, and if any one of you decide to grab onto it, make sure you share whatever the proceeds and profits are with the Squeaky Wheel. But rat root ale, right? Instead of ginger ale, we come up with, and now not only are you getting the sweet, gentle flavors of rat root, you're also getting the healing properties of it. Lawrence, I think you and I, as we've talked before about how some of these, the pharmaceutical agencies, we don't want to give away all of our secrets, but if anybody's listening out there, Rat Root Ale brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel. So folks, make sure you look for it on your grocery shelves here in the next couple weeks. We're going to have to try and have somebody make a picture of that so that we can come up with our own marketing design for that. Lawrence, thank you again for sharing in the Indigenous Plants section. We're going to jump into, just as we finish and close our program today, a little bit of sports, Lawrence. I know you have one you want to talk about. One of the other things actually that I came across recently, and just a little homage to the band Rush that I'm wearing there, I actually got a chance to look at a Rush pinball game. And you know, that pinball game is just as complicated as the band. Like, there's, at one point I could see 5 balls moving around and the paddles are hitting everywhere. And you know, it's actually not that old of a pinball game, but if you have any success in the game, all of a sudden videos start coming up of the band as they're playing, and it'll change based on how well you're doing pinball. Now, I've been starting to keep my eyes open for it, but pinball games are anywhere between used like $3,000 and $15,000. It's crazy.
wow.
So I'd love to get my hands on one, folks. If you got anyone that's lying around there, we'd love to see a picture of it. Fire it over to us at TSW at Métis, thesqueakywheel.ca. And yeah, I'd love to have a look at it. Make sure you email Lawrence at thesqueakywheel.ca or fire it off to me, Ross at thesqueakywheel.ca. So Lawrence, take me through the Masters, because I understand you're watching that. And then we'll close off as we have a conversation about the Flames and the Oilers.
Well, I'm really hoping that the Masters, entertain Tiger Woods to, relive his dream and actually win it. But, I doubt it. The guy, we're in the third round today, and I know this will probably air, and there will be a champion already named, but he's already at, 8 below par already in 2 rounds. So, yeah, it's, I don't think Tiger Woods can catch him, but, that's the way it is. Yeah. Scheifele.
I did see that there's a leader who was just miles ahead.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually know which name. It was just sort of a comment that was out there. But of course, the Masters has seen people who have garnered strong leads. And then that's the tough part, when it's right down to the wire, right at the end, and they just come crashing down and lose. So I'm excited to see how it ends too, especially on the championship day. And then the Oilers and Flames. Folks, if you're not a fan of the Edmonton Oilers or the Calgary Flames, just pick up a Montreal jersey and go sit someplace else. Go sit someplace with Lawrence, because these two teams, folks, are winning. And I want to see these two teams go right to the end. Just enjoying all the hockey that's going out there. And if it wasn't for baseball starting, folks, you'd see me in a Draisaitl jersey.
Right. No, it's a pretty exciting time. You know, the restaurants probably need it, and the bars too. So, yeah, we'll see how this playoff run goes.
Yeah, I'm excited to take it all the way to the end. So, Lawrence, as always, you and I have shared another fabulous conversation. Lots of things that we chatted about. From everybody behind the scenes, from Leighton, from Devin, from Lawrence and I, thank you for all of our supporters. Make sure you click subscribe. Folks, you can always email us. Bring up your suggestions and your comments, and we appreciate your time and your consideration for this conversation. Make sure you think about your family, think about those elders, think about the Ukrainian people, and folks, keep the wheel squeaking. So from all of us here and behind the scenes, best wishes. Keep the wheel squeaking. Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, MMA Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambert. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tanse.